Hi everybody, Melissa here, and today's lesson is called Mindset Management. And so this is for managing the chronic illness of premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And so we are going to talk a little bit about how we can use different tools to better manage our monthly cycle and our experience with PMDD. All right, and so here's the plan. We're going to start by reviewing what PMDD is, which I'm sure you're still very familiar, but just in case, we'll review it quickly. Then we'll talk about why mindset matters, and of course, why cyclical living may be of benefit. And then we'll discuss some tools for monthly planning as well as boundaries. And then we're going to reinforce those plans by talking about practice, making progress, traps we can fall into. We're going to talk about practice again because it's so important. And then we'll finish off with how we can put some things into place. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, so you, like I said, are probably well versed in this, but as a quick reminder and review, PMDD is chronic. It is a cyclical disorder that occurs during the luteal phase or premenstrual phase of the cycle, of the menstrual cycle. Of course, that's why it's called premenstrual dysphoric disorder. We also know that it's severe, that this is not something that you can just brush off or ignore because symptoms can affect our whole being. They can be mental, emotional, and physical, and can include a whole host of symptoms that I have listed here. And so we may experience some symptoms some months and then not have other symptoms other months. It depends kind of on what we have going on, how our management may be working. And so we sometimes have better months. It doesn't mean that every month is awful, but it is severe and it is chronic. And we also know that PMDD is debilitating. That's why it's so much worse than, say, having premenstrual syndrome. And so this can affect our social, economic, academic, and relationships, and it can cause us to have dysfunction in these areas of our life. And so that's why it's so important that we have tools in place for helping us to manage them to the best of our ability. And so mindset matters. Of course, I'm going to say that because this is a therapeutic yoga community and we are going to be talking about and working on our mindset through meditation, visualization, affirmation, all sorts of tools that can help us de-link from this idea that we are our PMDD diagnosis. It is a facet of our experience. It is not our whole experience. But the reality is that PMDD is severe and it's chronic, and we have to have things in place to help us manage monthly. But that doesn't mean that we always have to approach it with a negative defeatist mindset. Of course, way easier said than done, but we want to try to adopt a mindset that says, I will do my best to thrive. I believe in progress over perfection, and I do have tools to help me. I am more than a diagnosis. So even as many of us had to fight or wait a really long time to get a diagnosis of PMDD, we have to remember that we are more than that. We do have to manage it, but we can't let it be everything about us. And so this takes us into why we want to think about living cyclically. And so you've probably heard discussions about cyclical living, basically on anything talking about PMDD management techniques, because it's not a new concept, but it is a really important one for people who are menstruating beings to adopt, especially people who deal with a chronic disorder like PMDD or PME. And so as we may know and are totally aware of, right now, most of us live on a daily schedule. Maybe a weekly schedule, because we do have different days of the week that we do different things, of course. But we don't have a 24-hour hormonal cycle. And so that makes it harder to plan on a daily basis because we really need to think about our time divided up more in months. And so when we plan by a monthly cycle, that better helps to set us up for success. And of course, that's a big change. And so we have to work very diligently when planning on a monthly cycle and living cyclically to enact our own boundaries, because society's not going to just make it easy for us. In order to function to the best of our ability, we have to establish our own best practices for managing PMDD. And so setting boundaries around our needs now helps to set that precedent too, that not all people have a daily hormonal cycle and not all people can function the same way throughout a month. And now, of course, I'm saying a month here. We obviously don't start our period at the beginning of the month and go through the cycle in a very timely scheduled manner like that. But we do want to think about living in a cycle that has times of doing less and doing more. And so this is really important because when we can do better, we ideally feel better. This is a proactive approach to PMDD management. And with this approach, we should feel more empowered and we should feel like we can find a balance between activity and rest. So there will be times of more doing and times of more being. And with that in mind, planning purposefully, very intentionally for that, we hopefully can reduce the amount of stress, shame, and guilt about needing to do less at certain times, where we're not comparing ourselves to a society or to an individual who doesn't live monthly, that we only compare ourselves to our best and what serves us best in the management of our PMDD. Okay, so this is very generic and you are going to find something that works best for you, but I wanted to give you an idea of how to plan monthly based on where you may be in your cycle. And so I'm going to break this down a little bit further in more slides, but this is how I want you to start to think about your activity level. And so during the week of your period, of your actual menstruation, we want to think about having lower activity days. So where we may only do 2 to 3 kind of bigger things, what I'm calling must-dos, and 2 to 4 littler things or little do's. And so you, of course, will decide what those must-dos and little do's are, and they can vary. If you have a really heavy, painful cycle, you may do a little bit less. As your cycle starts to clear up and you move into the follicular phase of your cycle, you are likely going to have a lot more energy, feel a lot more active, and be able to accomplish a lot more. And so this is where we can start to add more things into our schedule. And so we can have more activity, more must-dos, and more little-dos. And some days we might get everything done on our list and still have a day during follicular where we don't do anything. That's also totally okay. These are just suggestions. And so now ovulation can vary a little bit more. This usually is not a super long period of time, but it does signify the shift from follicular into luteal. And for some people, pain can be a part of their ovulation experience. So here it really will vary from individual to individual. Some people feel really energized and sexy and confident around ovulation, and they may feel more akin to the time in follicular rather than in the time of menstruation. So they may have more opportunity to do more. If that's not the case for you, you can plan more around what your must-dos and little-dos are during the time of menstruation. And so then, of course, we know that during luteal, especially for people with PMDD and or PME, that we are going to do way less. And so this may drop down to 1 to 2 must-dos and maybe 2 little-dos. And so we want to lower our expectations for what we can accomplish at that time because we are going to focus and prioritize on how we feel and how we can best take care of ourselves. And so let's look at some examples of what must-dos and little-dos may be. And of course, this is going to be different for you, and I would highly recommend that you make a list for yourself of what those things might include. All right, and so as I said, this is just an example, but you might include on your must-dos starting a load of laundry because we all want clean underwear and socks, and maybe our favorite pair of pants need washing. We also will want to finish anything that may be due. So when we have deadlines, that may be a non-negotiable no matter what part of our cycle we're in. That doesn't mean that we can't ask for extensions or help or maybe wait until the next day, depending on what we have going on. But a must do is generally going to be something that has an outside factor in it, like going to work or school. Unfortunately, we may not be able to take all that time off, but we can prioritize that as perhaps the only thing that we do that day. And so if we have others that depend on us, like children or pets, we may have to prioritize getting them to where they need to go as a must do during that time. So that may be including getting the kids to school or walking the dog. And so a must do can also be something that we just don't find pleasant, like paying a bill or scheduling an appointment. It also may be quite a bit of effort to go grocery shopping, to plan what you're going to get and then go to the store and then take it home and put it all away. That may be something that's really exhausting, especially during luteal, but maybe no big deal during follicular. And so you can start to kind of plan out a little bit more how many things you're going to take on per day that is a must do. So this is kind of a non-negotiable thing that you have to do. And so there may be things that you would want to add to this list. Maybe some of these things are not applicable to you at all and could move to your little do list. So let's look at examples of that. All right, and so there may be things on this list that are must-dos for you that would be non-negotiable that you have to do, or these may be things that are overwhelming and could not fall into the little do category whatsoever. But of course, we're all going to want to eat off of clean dishes. So loading or unloading the dishwasher or the drying rack or doing some dishes, that may be something that you can do that's just a small task. Maybe it's even just washing one plate and one cup and making sure that you have something clean to eat off of for your next meal. That can be a little do. And now showering may be something for some of y'all that is a must do. That may feel like a big kind of overwhelming task. I know that when we're feeling depressed, showering can be sort of the last thing that we like and that we're going to prioritize. I personally love to take a shower before bed. That's one of my wind down routines. And so that's a small thing for me. I have a really practiced routine around it. And so taking a shower is a small win for me each day. And so another example of a little do, maybe returning a package, dropping off something at the mail, taking out the trash, or tidying up a small space, maybe taking the glasses off of your nightstand or clearing off a space on your counter in the kitchen, maybe just taking the garbage out of the bathroom or out of your bedroom. So small little tasks that can feel like a win, but aren't totally energy consuming. This can also include checking in with friends or family, maybe answering an email, hopefully one that's not super high stakes, maybe one that's not related to work, and watering your plants. And so I always feel really good when I water my plants. It's a really nourishing activity for me and my plants. And so that can be another small win. And now changing your sheets may be kind of a big, overwhelming, daunting task, depending on how you're feeling, what part of your cycle that you're in. And so remember, on the days where it feels like too much, just change your pillowcase so that you have a fresh pillowcase to lay your head on. I personally love getting into a bed that has clean sheets on it. And so that would be a really great win for me, even on days where my energy was really low. And so you can decide for yourself what must-dos and little-dos would be. But planning and having a better idea of what things that you'll prioritize based on what part of your cycle you're in can be hugely empowering. And of course, you don't have to call them must-dos or little-dos. You can come up with whatever cute name you like. But having an idea of what you can reasonably accomplish when can help you feel more prepared. And so one of the things that we'll need in order to live like this, of course, are boundaries. And so boundaries make more space. And it seems maybe like it's a little confusing, but boundaries actually make space for what is most important. So when we have a moat or we have a high fence, however you want to think about what your boundary may be, we're able to put what we need the most inside that space. So whatever the moat or the fence is protecting, that is what's most precious to us. And so I know that boundaries do not necessarily come easy to everyone. We have an entire course in the Yoga for PMDD community called Boundaries 101 that I would highly encourage you to check out, because that will go through boundaries at each layer of your being. So talking about setting physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, energetic boundaries, all really great stuff in there. We're going to talk about boundaries a little bit today too, of course, but to go more in depth, make sure you check that course out. But again, in order to plan, we are going to need some room to say no. We'll also need some room to prioritize ourselves. And the only way that we can do that is with boundaries. And so let's take a look at how boundaries can function during different parts of our cycle. So boundaries by the timing of our cycle. There is a theme here, and it's pretty obvious. So during the time of menstruation, we're going to have high boundaries. And so you can think maybe this is, if you believe your boundary to be like a fence, we're going to have a high fence. No one's getting in during that time. And so we can keep those high boundaries around our time, energy, and our ability to socialize when we're bleeding. It's just not necessarily the time to. That's an internally focused experience. However, when we move into follicular, and perhaps for some of us during ovulation, we can have lower boundaries. We can spend more time doing things with others, out and about. We can be more active and enjoy more activity. And so those may be times with lower boundaries. You may say yes more during that time. And then again, when we move into luteal, we're going to return to having our higher, stronger boundaries. We can think about being a little bit more introverted, a little bit more self-focused, and making sure that we're prioritizing our own needs because we may not be feeling our highest and best during this phase. And so the only way that we're going to get good at managing our mindset and managing monthly is if we practice. And so, of course, in therapeutic yoga, we are always practicing. We are continually trying to improve how we feel, how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to the world. And so when we're practicing prioritizing ourselves, we are going to need some grace for making mistakes, and we're going to need some room to get the hang of it. And so when we are implementing these new practices, we are going to start by prioritizing ourselves. And when that comes to boundary setting, that means saying no. And we have to be able to say no without feeling the need to explain ourselves or apologize for it. You've probably heard me say this before, but no is a complete sentence. It doesn't require any explanation. We want to regard our time, space, and energy as a finite asset that only you own. So you are the only one who can decide how it gets used, who gets to enjoy it. And you're the only one who can make that decision for yourself because it is yours and yours alone. And you only have so much of it. So you should be a little bit stingy. You don't want to just give it away willy-nilly. And so as you start this practice of prioritizing yourself, shifting your mindset around your management of PMDD, and living on a monthly cycle, you can ask yourself, what is the best use of my precious life? How will I serve my highest and best self? And of course, it doesn't hurt to have an idea of what your highest and best self may be. And you want to, of course, remember that we're not practicing for perfection. That is, there's no such thing. We are practicing for progress. And so when we're making progress, we want to recognize our own growth, celebrating our wins, and realizing that nothing is too small to celebrate. You may be a recovering people pleaser, and so saying no once a month may be a huge deal for you. So you should celebrate that. And so as you work on a new way of organizing your life, scheduling your time, being a little stingier with who has access to you and when they do, you're going to make some mistakes. So forgive yourself for those mistakes and try to learn the lesson. So again, you can ask yourself, what can you learn from the experience? And how can I do better if, and most likely when, a similar situation presents itself? All life is circular learning. We are always going to come back to the same lessons again and again. And to the best of our ability, we want to try to do better when it's possible. And so recognize that we are only looking for small incremental steps of progress. In therapeutic yoga, we call that krama. And it's just a step, a small step forward. And so as we move forward, we want to be really careful that we don't fall into some particular traps. And so these are very well-known traps. We've all probably fallen into these before, but we want to try to avoid feelings of guilt or shame when it comes to prioritizing ourselves and adjusting how we manage our time each month. And so that means trying not to use words like should. Like, I should have more energy. I should be able to do everything that I want. I should be a better student, coworker, wife, best friend, whatever it may be. Because those ideas say that you yourself and your needs are not as important as they truly are. And so that goes right into feelings of being unworthy. You are worthy of your own time and attention. You are worthy of your own self-prioritization. Remember, our time, energy, space, our life is a finite experience. And we have to protect that with everything that we can, because we are worthy of our own love. We are truly worthy of having the best experience we possibly can, regardless of the fact that we have a diagnosis or an experience with premenstrual dysphoric disorder. We should not feel ashamed to take the time that we need to live our best life. And that means saying no sometimes. That may mean disappointing other people sometimes and their expectations of who we are. But the most important person to make proud and happy and to feel loved is ourself. So beware of these traps. Notice when you should on yourself and try not to. There's no need. And so let's visit progress part 2 to remind ourselves that it is ongoing. We are still going to need to practice. We are still going to make small steps forward in progressing, because there's no one right way to do this. There are a lot of different paths to success and happiness on this journey, and your journey is solely unique to you. We may both have a diagnosis of PMDD, but we may have an entirely different experience of what our symptoms are each month. We may have entirely different experiences in terms of our social standing. Our different intersectional identities may make our experience with PMDD entirely different. It may be in your best interest to go through menopause early through chemical or surgical treatment. Someone else may be pregnant, as I am right now. So there's different ways that we are going to have this experience, and it's unique to us. So comparing ourselves to anyone else's journey is not it. We are having this experience and doing the best we can with the knowledge that we have and the tools that we're learning how to use. So remind yourself on this journey that you are not expected to be perfect. You are not expected to be anyone other than yourself, because that's so silly. You are precious on your own, and you don't need to be anyone else. You only need to be you. So further, your progress is the only progress that matters. You are enough. You are worthy. And of course, no one would choose PMDD. No one would choose to have this experience of a chronic cyclical disorder. But we can choose management techniques that help us to the best of our ability, and we can believe that we are doing our best, which is a huge shift in mindset. And we also have to take to heart that no matter how great the tool is, if we only apply it intellectually and not in our lived life, then it still won't work. So you could watch this whole presentation and then never do anything with this information, and it probably won't serve you in any way, except maybe you use it to feel guilty or shame yourself that you're not doing more or doing better. So use the tools. The tools are out there for you to use, and as you practice using them, you will become much more comfortable with their application. So let's start to conclude this presentation by putting things in their place. Okay, so of course, if we're talking about managing monthly, it's going to be very necessary that we know what our cycle is like. And so that means we have to track it. And so you've probably heard that from everybody who speaks about PMDD, but it's a fact. You have to know what your cycle is going to be like in order to plan. Because if you don't know that you're going to be entering the luteal phase and you suddenly feel awful, it's really easy to forget, oh, I feel awful because of PMDD. You may look for a million other reasons, and that can really make things more difficult. So get super acquainted with your cycle. Use a tracking app, use pen and paper, use both. With apps, there are usually a way to track your mood as well as physical body symptoms. And I would strongly encourage you to do that. The more information you have, the more empowered you will feel to make decisions that best serve you. And so I also highly recommend that you get a cute calendar. When you know what your cycle is, you can start to look at what your monthly schedule may be. And so then that you can start to decide, what boundaries do I need where? So during the luteal phase, let's say, for example, it's falling over a holiday, maybe you know that you're not going to want to host everyone at your house because you're going to want to be able to leave when it's time for you to go home and rest. So having an idea of what boundaries to put in place during what part of your cycle can help you plan for areas of more or less activity. And so maybe that helps you to decide during this week, I'm going to try to get these things done. And during this week, I'm going to prioritize resting and recuperating. And I would really encourage you to get fun with it. Use pens that are different colors, color things in, use stickers. Make it so that it's something that you want to use. It's a tool that is really helpful. Maybe it's bright. Maybe you have different colors for different parts of your cycle so that it's not so overwhelming. And it's a tool that is functional for you. And then, of course, I want to remind you that if, but mostly when, this practice goes to shit and you find that you've fallen off using this tool, try again. You are working on a new skill. And so it would be silly to think that you could master it immediately. Those things just don't happen. It usually takes a long time to get good at something. And so remember, you are learning. Keep at it because it will pay off and become second nature eventually, especially because there's a lot of reward in having a better understanding of how to manage your cycle monthly, because that will help you manage your mindset, knowing that you aren't just at the whim of your hormones, that there are things that you can do and put in place. So moving to monthly cyclical living is a challenge, and it's one with rewards that make it worth the effort. So don't give up. Try again. There are more things that you can do to help with PMDD too, and those should also go on your schedule. Those should be part of your management tools and techniques, including your therapeutic yoga practice. And so I want to thank you so much for going on this journey with me. Of course, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm here to support you in your efforts. And I want to remind you that you got this. This is a new skill. It will require practice, but your mindset matters. And if you can find ways where you feel empowered to manage PMDD on a monthly cycle, you will feel better. And now, of course, you will have to continue practicing. You'll have to continue using some of your other tools. This won't be the only tool that works, but it will help. I promise you. And so once again, let me know if there's anything I can do to support you. Email me or message me. I will absolutely leave a copy of this presentation in a PDF form so that you can look at it that way too. And send me a picture of your calendar. I would love to see what you come up with. All right. Thank you so much.